Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Playboi Carti, Die Lit. Playboi Carti is an American rapper, singer, songwriter, and artist who has achieved this enigmatic status in the modern rap game. His combination of simple, repetitive hooks, atmospheric beats, and a gothic, borderline satanic image gained him this cult-like status with insatiable fans, so much so that his sophomore album, Whole Lotta Red, was one of the most hyped up and discussed of 2020. And a lot of that fame and admiration can be attributed to this record, the debut studio album, Die Lit, released in 2018. Playboi Carti is one of those artists that I can appreciate a lot, yet his music has never truly been my cup of tea, and I've never really been swept off of my feet by it. I don't really return to his debut mixtape, but Whole Lotta Red has grown on me, so I figured now is the best time to take a look at Die Lit, arguably his most well-received project. So let's dive right in. What are my thoughts on Die Lit? Let's find out as I review it track by track. Since I don't think there were actually any singles to this project, we will just start at the top of the track list, with that being Long Time parentheses Intro, which sets the stage pretty well for this record. First, let's talk about Carti himself. He's got a noticeably higher pitched delivery, sounds very nasally and robotic for the most part, and his flow is hardly a flow. It can even just be like melodic ad-libs at times. The hook is the crux of the song, which is just the same line repeated over and over again. The rhyme scheme is extremely simple otherwise. But let's face it, none of these details are really the selling point here. What is, however, is the production. An oscillating synth which obscures the percussion, giving it a cloudy quality. And I'll be damned, I totally get the appeal of this track. The simplicity is infectious, the beat is so easy to get lost in. Yeah, I like this track. R.I.P, in my opinion, hits harder than Long Time on pretty much every front. Instrumentally, this one's much more of a banger. The distorted bass is like this surrounding dome for the track. You just cannot escape it, as the singular keys act as the main melody, while Carti's own ad-libs almost function as part of the beat, sometimes even having around 4 to 5 at once, all layered on top of each other. Structurally, I like this one more too. It feels more fleshed out, the verses are longer, there's much less empty space while Carti's flow is still simple, but he does manage to switch it up a few times to keep the song engaging. Pretty solid track. Lean for Real featuring SKEPTA is a track I can't say I'm all that jazzed about. Again, production is killer. It has a very almost like walking in the forest late at night kind of vibe to it, very ominous and dark. It's really captivating. But there's only so many times you can hear Carti slur the chorus, I'm gonna be free, I'm gonna be free, and it just not get a little bit tedious after a while. I will say the verses are nice, Carti has a bit more energy there, and SKEPTA's verse is great. He breaks the monotony and complements the eerie beat well, with a deeper and angrier flow. But I don't know, after hearing this one my fair share of times, this one was just a little bit too mind-numbing for me personally. Old Money almost borders on that excruciating level that Lean for Real did for me, but thankfully I think this one has enough variation in it to stand out. The chorus is that same mindless repetition, but it doesn't drag on nearly as long, and the verses present a nice flow switch with some solid energy. Production is good, this one's definitely the weakest in terms so far on the album. The typical trap percussion reigns supreme in the mix, letting these chilly synths just kind of freeze in the background. It takes its time to set in, unlike the others which had an instant kick to them. I mean, it's still a good track though, I found myself nodding to this one more often than not. Love Hurts featuring Travis Scott is a collaboration on paper that should have been a ludicrous success, but in execution I think it only really turned out to be a mild toe tapper at best. Not even that it was a drastic tonal shift for either of the MCs, Carti still got his small flows, nasally delivery over these futuristic synth blasts, and looming distorted bass. Travis though might honestly be the worst part of the song. He doesn't deliver a bad feature, but I just think I got overzealous with the idea of the two collabing, so to hear it in moderation, smothered in autotune and all, it kind of became a reality check that maybe these two wildly different psychedelic artists should probably stay in their own separate lane. The hook also didn't do too much for me. It moves at a glacial pace in comparison to the verses, and it's just a bit of a slog. Nothing inherently wrong with it, but the stars didn't align as I thought they could have. Shoota featuring Lil Uzi Vert may just be the best collab on the entire album, aside from PIERRE, of course. This one was very well done. The quirky piano keys which jump into a sporadic yet sprawling beat, all the differing pitches of tempos and keys and synths. It's hectic, yet contained in its melody despite the absence of any typical drum until about halfway through the song. Speaking of which, Uzi's entire performance on the track is drumless, which is kind of a shame since I feel like it could have gone very hard, but it just goes to show how well he did since I think he did a great job. The percussion comes back for Carti, and then it's just all smooth sailing from there. The percussion puts a little bit of a leash on this beat, letting Carti shine with a much more lively and familiar, enjoyable flow. Great track here. Right Now featuring Pierre BOURNE has a very similar feeling to the intro, Long Time, most notably in its production. And I kind of have the same exact feelings on it. Same fluctuating synth wall, ticking hi-hat, but even tinier flow here, much more so than on any other track prior, even going as far as 2 syllables per bar on the hook. But honestly, Pierre BOURNE is my favorite part of the song, not only in his production, but he actually gives a performance here, and his deeper tone and slurred performance is a bewitching experience, much more so than Carti. Yeah, good track. Poke It Out featuring Nicki Minaj, on the other hand, is one of the most jarring combinations of styles, but miraculously, I think this one is a resounding victory. Nicki at least tries to fit the mold and arguably does so well. Her bridge fits that repetitive manner. Her verse is pretty long though, and I don't think it really needed to be, but nonetheless she switches between a bunch of flows and styles, and none of them ever feel out of place. Carti does his thing as usual. He's a bit more energetic here too, which I always appreciate. And speaking of energetic, this production turns the track into a heavy banger. Most of the tracks before felt much more mellow and spacious. This one's just pure heat all the way, with the high-pitched keys, prominent bass, and the clicking of the hi-hat sounding almost like a bomb's about to go off. Good song. Home parentheses KOD is probably one of the weaker moments for me. I wasn't all that crazy about this one. As always, the production was great. I liked the light skipping of the hi-hat and the dense waves of synth. It had a nice vibe to it, and Carti gave some lively performances. But I think what really stopped me from enjoying this one was just the singular flow all across the track. There were at least some switch-ups on earlier cuts that kept me engaged, and this one was just the same flow, same tempo for the entire 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It really just pulls me out of the vibe when it's the exact same thing for the full song. Wasn't for me. I'm gonna pass on this one. Fell in Love featuring Bryson Tiller is a song I expected to be a slower jam considering the feature, but to my surprise it was just another Carti track. That same signature percussion, the wavy synths courtesy of Pierre. Similar flows, although I will say Carti sounds noticeably jaded on this song, much more so than on any song prior, which I personally think is a hindrance. If he went all out on this one, this could have been a highlight for me, especially since Bryson kind of blows my expectations out of the water. I think his performance contributed to the vibe way more than Carti did. A bit more melodious, a much more lush and full-bodied voice. This one may warm up on me with future listens, but as of right now, it's just good. Foreign was quite the trip of a track. The reverse synths are hypnotic, combined with the slower tempo, brittle percussion, and the intoxicating performance. It genuinely kind of made me fall into a trance when I first heard it. It was a very surreal experience. After hearing it a few more times though, that effect has kind of worn off on me, but not too much. I still like how mesmerizing the groove is, and I'm thankful the track is fairly short, as I feel like that melody could get a bit nauseating after too long. For what it is though, I enjoyed it, although I kind of wished it retained that narcotic effect through multiple listens. Pull Up is another track that just kind of clicked with me. Production is especially hitting on here. I love the bouncy yet distorted bass and the siren-like synths that are further back in the mix. It kind of has an apocalyptic feeling, and much like Poke It Out, it's purely a banger. Some of that thanks to Carti's energy as he delivers these simplistic flows with a charismatic energy and punchy ad-libs. This is a bop. I like this one. Mileage featuring Chief Keef hits yet again, although this one just had me instantly. And what really sold me on this track was that vocal melody on the chorus. It feels clean, almost a little bit poppy with Carti holding that note. Something about that just worked so well, and it was just all uphill from here. Well, aside from Chief Keef, I don't think he works that well over this lighter, less aggressive beat. Although to his credit, he does try to tone it down, but I think his natural cadence felt a little bit off over this one. Carti's entire presence might as well be a hook. Even the verse was very underdeveloped and overly so for Carti. So while I may not care for this one on a substance level, the vibe did have me pretty quickly, so it balances out. Flatbed Freestyle is where I really start to notice Carti using his baby voice inflection. It's not necessarily pitched or anything, but it comes off very childish and slurred like how a baby would talk. and I personally have never been the biggest fan of it. It just leans a bit too far out of that enjoyment level for me, and I'd much rather just hear him slur his words naturally. Regardless, I think the beat is pretty hard. Those bass thumps are just like thunder, and the claps of the snare and the satisfying background melody are all enjoyable. But that delivery for me has just always been a bit of a turnoff. No Time featuring Gunna is a track I kinda expected to be this clear, unadulterated vibe, and does it ever do so? I love the shimmery, watery synth over this thin percussion. It really does feel like a Gunna instrumental, which for any consistent viewers of this channel, you may know that I'm not the biggest fan of Gunna, but him and Carti on this track share an undeniable chemistry. For the most part, I like Gunna's verse, but his cadence to me always just comes off very cut and dried, and he does little to switch it up here. Carti is the saving grace in my opinion. I think his nasally, higher-pitched voice is much more malleable, which is a trait in which he's proved on older and newer songs as he continues on his baby voice shtick here. But this one was much more bearable to me. I think this one will warm up on me tremendously. Middle of the Summer featuring Red Coldhearted has a pretty similar instrumental to Foreign, at least in design. The synths especially, they feel like they're being played backwards and present a haunting vibe to the song. There's light ominous flickers also combined with that typical bass and drum. It's a very infectious beat. Carti does his thing as per usual, returning to his regular tone, and I think it's incredibly well done. And I was not familiar with Red Coldhearted prior to this, and I did not expect her to be a woman, so that was quite the surprise. But I do think the two of them play off each other really well. Neither of them step over each other. It's just a well done song on every aspect. CHOPPA Won't Miss featuring Young Thug has a pretty alright instrumental. It's nothing special here, but it's also not the worst. It walks on this fine line between vibey with the pulsing synth, but also being this banger with the more aggressive bass, and I feel like when a track borders on that line as this one does, it kind of loses both effects in the process, so I just get sucked out of both moods. I will say though, this is probably Carti's most least effort delivery on the project. His slurring goes into hyperdrive on this one, almost like he's doing it for a joke at this point. His flow is pretty solid though. Thankfully, Young Thug brings the energy, cementing his verse firmly in banger territory, while also providing a similar performance to Carti. This is another one I really want to warm up on me, but right now, I'm not the craziest about it. R.I.P. Fredo, parentheses, Notice Me, featuring Young NUDY, is the only track off this record that utilizes Carti's baby voice that I'm fully enamored with. This one is really nice. The beat is downright perfect. I love the chiming synths. They feel playful in a kind of terrifying way. The bass is a fitting accompaniment, and the skittering hi-hats stay in the background. It's got a horror vibe to it. Speaking of which, Young NUDY is a perfect feature for this beat. He's always had the dark, kind of spooky ambience, and this song was just made for him. His cold, in-your-face cadence is just so good. That's my thoughts on this track. So good. And finally, the closer Top featuring PIERRE Born Again, which is also the shortest track on this record at just 2 minutes and 13 seconds, and it's an effective closer. I quite like this one. It's a by-the-numbers Carti track, mainly with the extremely repetitive hook, the light plunky synth, but this time with a much harder bass, easily qualifying this as more on the banger side of the record. I'm confused as to why PIERRE Born was listed as a feature on this one. Unlike on Right Now, he doesn't have a vocal performance here, but his production work is great, and the song is also that. It's great. Overall, I was genuinely blown away with how much I enjoyed this album. If you had given me this when I was like 14, 15, I probably would have hated it, but after immersing myself in the more fun and mindless side of rap for the past 2, maybe 3 years, I found a strong appreciation for this kind of stuff. It's intoxicating in its simplicity. The flows are admittedly basic on a structural level, and the lyrics are cookie cutter for the genre. But the production is tantalizing and hypnotic. My main gripe with this record that I didn't really bring up is its length. It's almost an hour of this sugar high. And an hour of that sound is a lot to handle and might come off a bit overwhelming, but goddammit, some of these songs aren't addicting as all hell. I'm feeling a 7.5 out of 10 on this album. This was a surprise to me. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.